We live in an age of unprecedented material abundance, yet never have souls been so barren. The glittering towers of our technological civilization cast shadows over landscapes once illuminated by transcendent purpose. While we celebrate each scientific breakthrough, each economic triumph, we witness simultaneously the withering of those permanent things that make existence truly human. This is not progress, it is the grand illusion of our time. Through decades of contemplating the conservative mind, I have observed how genuine advancement requires moral and spiritual foundation, not merely material accumulation. Today we shall examine why societies that sacrifice spirit for substance inevitably discover that their material gains turn to dust. The urgent question confronting our generation is whether we possess sufficient wisdom to recognize that man cannot live by bread alone, and that civilizations built solely on material premises crumble from within. True prosperity encompasses the whole human person, body, mind, and soul. When we neglect this eternal truth, we impoverish ourselves despite our apparent wealth. The conservative tradition has long understood that material comfort without spiritual cultivation produces not civilization but sophisticated barbarism. Chapter 1: The Mirage of Materialism. The fundamental error of modern thought lies in mistaking material progress for human progress. Since the Enlightenment's promise that science and industry would usher in a golden age, we have witnessed extraordinary technological achievements coupled with profound spiritual decline. Our ancestors understood that external prosperity without inner cultivation produces not civilization but sophisticated barbarism. The conservative mind recognizes that true advancement must harmonize material improvement with moral and spiritual development. Consider the trajectory of Western civilization over the past 2 centuries. We have eradicated diseases that plagued mankind for millennia, connected the globe through instant communication, and created wealth beyond the dreams of ancient kings. Yet simultaneously, we observe rising rates of suicide, addiction, depression, and alienation in precisely those societies that have achieved the greatest material success. The correlation is not coincidental, it reveals the bankruptcy of materialist philosophy. The permanent things, faith, family, community, tradition, and transcendent purpose, cannot be manufactured in laboratories or purchased with currency. They emerge from generations of cultivation, requiring reverence, patience, and wisdom. When societies prioritize immediate gratification and measurable outcomes over these intangible goods, they discover that material prosperity without spiritual foundation creates hollow men living in hollow societies. Modern economics treats human beings as mere consumers and producers, reducing the complexity of human nature to statistical abstractions. But man possesses a spiritual dimension that transcends material calculation. The moral imagination that shapes character and community cannot be quantified, yet without it, all material achievements become meaningless accumulations. This is why prosperous nations often produce the most miserable citizens. They have forgotten that happiness springs from virtue, not consumption. Edmund Burke understood this truth when he observed that society is a partnership between those who are living, those who are dead, and those who are yet to be born. Material progress that ignores this partnership, that focuses solely on immediate satisfaction of present desires, inevitably impoverishes future generations by squandering the spiritual capital accumulated across centuries. The conservative tradition reminds us that genuine progress elevates both material conditions and human souls, recognizing that one without the other produces either poverty or emptiness. When we worship at the altar of material advancement while neglecting the cultivation of virtue, wisdom, and reverence, we construct towering monuments to our own spiritual poverty. True prosperity requires both bread and beauty, both efficiency and elevation, both comfort and character. Chapter 2: The Corruption of Human Purpose. Materialism corrupts not merely our understanding of progress but our conception of human purpose itself. When societies adopt purely secular and material worldviews, they reduce human existence to biological and economic functions, stripping life of transcendent meaning. The moral imagination that once inspired great art, noble sacrifice, and virtuous living withers under the harsh light of utilitarian calculation. In traditional societies, human purpose was understood within cosmic context. Work served not merely individual advancement but community flourishing and divine glory. The craftsman took pride in excellent workmanship because his labor participated in God's creative activity. The farmer cultivated the earth as steward of divine providence. The mother raised children as sacred trust rather than personal fulfillment. Marriage created not merely emotional satisfaction but sacred covenant reflecting divine love and ensuring cultural continuity. Education transmitted not merely useful skills but wisdom accumulated across generations. Students learned their place within the great chain of being, understanding how individual lives gained meaning through participation in something greater than personal desires. Knowledge was pursued not for power or profit but for truth and beauty that connected temporal existence to eternal reality. Contrast this with modern materialism's narrow vision. Work becomes mere wage labor disconnected from higher purpose, valued only for income it generates rather than contribution to common good. Marriage becomes contractual arrangement subject to cost-benefit analysis, dissolved when partners calculate that alternative arrangements might yield greater personal satisfaction. Education becomes job training divorced from character formation, producing technically competent individuals who lack wisdom about life's deeper purposes. Children become lifestyle choices rather than sacred trusts, their value measured through economic calculation of costs versus benefits. The elderly become burdens rather than repositories of wisdom, warehoused in institutions rather than honored within families. Under such impoverished understanding, no wonder anxiety and despair flourish even amid abundance. Life loses its inherent dignity and transcendent purpose. The spiritual poverty behind material progress manifests clearly in our cultural productions. Where previous ages created soaring cathedrals that lifted souls toward divine beauty, we produce functional buildings that shelter bodies while starving spirits. Where medieval craftsmen carved intricate details seen only by God, modern architects prioritize efficiency over elevation. Where traditional societies produced literature, music, and art that explored eternal themes of love, sacrifice, and redemption, we create entertainment that appeals to lowest common denominators. This corruption extends throughout our institutions. Universities abandon liberal education for vocational training, treating students as raw material to be processed for economic productivity rather than human beings to be formed in wisdom and virtue. Churches embrace therapeutic deism rather than transcendent truth, offering comfort rather than challenge, affirmation rather than transformation. Government expands to fill the void left by declining families and communities, attempting to provide through bureaucratic programs what previous generations found through natural associations. The conservative mind insists that human beings require meaning beyond material satisfaction, purpose beyond personal pleasure, and hope beyond temporal achievement. When societies ignore this truth, they create prosperous prisons where bodies are fed but souls starve. Recovery requires rediscovering those permanent things that connect temporal existence to eternal purpose, that elevate human life above animal existence, that make civilization truly civilized. Chapter 3: The Democracy of the Dead. Our materialist age suffers from chronological arrogance, the presumption that each generation surpasses its predecessors in wisdom simply because it possesses superior technology. This attitude severs us from tradition, that democracy of the dead which offers accumulated wisdom of centuries. When we dismiss ancestral knowledge as obsolete superstition, we impoverish ourselves spiritually while congratulating ourselves on material sophistication. Traditional societies understood that genuine progress builds upon foundations laid by previous generations. They recognized that human nature remains constant despite changing circumstances, and that certain truths transcend temporal boundaries. The permanent things, justice, prudence, temperance, fortitude, faith, hope, and charity, guide human flourishing across all ages. These virtues cannot be improved through technological innovation, they must be cultivated through education, practice, and grace received from those who have gone before. Consider how traditional communities approached economic life. They understood that prosperity should serve human flourishing, not dominate it. Craftsmen took pride in excellent work, viewing their labor as vocation serving community good rather than mere source of personal income. Merchants operated within moral constraints that prioritized justice over maximum profit, understanding that reputation and trustworthiness mattered more than short-term gains. Agricultural life connected families to natural rhythms and divine providence, fostering patience, humility, and dependence upon forces beyond human control. Such arrangements may seem primitive to modern eyes, but they fostered spiritual richness that our wealthy societies conspicuously lack. Traditional economic relationships were embedded within moral communities that provided meaning, purpose, and mutual obligation. Work was understood as participation in divine creativity rather than mere drudgery performed for material reward. Property was seen as stewardship rather than absolute ownership, creating obligations to past and future generations. Traditional education emphasized moral formation alongside intellectual development. Students learned not merely facts and techniques but wisdom about right living received from generations of teachers who had wrestled with eternal questions about human nature and divine purpose. They studied great books containing timeless insights about virtue, justice, and the good life. They practiced disciplines that formed character through habituation in excellence. Such education produced leaders capable of governing themselves and others according to moral principles rather than mere expedience or popular opinion. Modern education, by contrast, treats students as raw material to be processed for economic productivity. We measure success through standardized test scores and employment statistics while ignoring character formation and wisdom transmission. We emphasize critical thinking that tears down traditional beliefs while providing no firm foundation for ethical judgment. We produce technically competent individuals who lack understanding of life's deeper purposes or connection to inherited wisdom. This disconnection from tradition leaves each generation to reinvent civilization from scratch, inevitably producing inferior results because we abandon accumulated wisdom of our ancestors. The conservative mind treasures traditional knowledge not from mere nostalgia but from recognition that previous generations faced eternal human problems and developed time-tested solutions. Their spiritual insights remain valuable regardless of technological change, offering guidance for perennial challenges of living well in community with others and in proper relationship to divine order. When we honor the democracy of the dead, we discover resources for addressing contemporary problems that mere material progress cannot provide. Tradition offers tested wisdom about human nature, proven institutions for channeling human energies constructively, and spiritual practices that connect finite existence to infinite reality. Recovery of this inheritance is essential for overcoming the spiritual poverty that accompanies material advancement disconnected from transcendent purpose. Chapter 4: The Transcendent Order and Secular Chaos. The spiritual poverty of material progress stems fundamentally from rejection of transcendent order, that divine framework which gives meaning and direction to human existence. When societies embrace purely secular worldviews, they cut themselves off from the source of moral authority and spiritual vitality. The result is not liberation but chaos, as competing materialisms struggle without ultimate standard of judgment or common vision of human flourishing. Traditional Western civilization recognized that human law and social order must reflect divine law and cosmic order. This understanding provided stable foundation for justice, limited government, and individual dignity. Kings and peasants alike acknowledged higher authority that constrained arbitrary power and protected fundamental rights. Such arrangements were not perfect, no human institution can be, but they provided moral coherence and spiritual direction that secular alternatives conspicuously lack. The transcendent order does not impose rigid uniformity but creates space for legitimate diversity within unified framework of meaning. Like a great symphony that allows individual instruments to contribute their unique voices while serving the composer's overall vision, traditional societies enabled different classes, regions, and vocations to flourish according to their nature while participating in common pursuit of justice and virtue. This organic unity reflected divine creativity that delights in variety while maintaining ultimate harmony. The French Revolution demonstrated the catastrophic consequences of rejecting transcendent order in favor of pure reason and abstract equality. Rather than creating paradise on earth, it produced terror, chaos, and eventual tyranny as competing factions struggled for power without higher authority to constrain their ambitions. Similar patterns emerged wherever revolutionary movements attempted to remake society according to ideological blueprints divorced from traditional wisdom and divine guidance. The 20th century's totalitarian regimes represent the logical conclusion of purely secular politics. When societies reject transcendent order, they inevitably create immanent substitutes, race, class, nation, or state, that demand absolute loyalty and unlimited sacrifice. These false gods prove far more tyrannical than traditional authorities constrained by divine law and natural justice. The spiritual vacuum created by secularization invites ideological possession that reduces human beings to means for achieving utopian ends. Consider how secular materialism approaches fundamental questions of human existence. Without transcendent reference point, concepts like justice, human dignity, and moral obligation become arbitrary preferences rather than binding truths discoverable through reason and revelation. If humans are merely sophisticated animals produced by blind evolutionary forces, why should we treat them differently from other resources to be exploited for maximum efficiency? If there is no divine purpose to existence, why should individual desires yield to common good or present satisfaction be sacrificed for future benefit? These questions are not merely philosophical abstractions, they shape practical policies and social institutions. Secular societies struggle to justify traditional moral restraints on economic activity, sexual behavior, and technological experimentation. They find difficulty maintaining institutions like marriage, family, and local community that require sacrifice of immediate desires for long-term benefits. They cannot explain why beauty, truth, and goodness should be pursued rather than mere pleasure and power. The conservative mind insists that sustainable social order requires acknowledgement of transcendent reality that provides both limitation and elevation of human aspirations. This does not mean theocracy. Proper understanding of divine order actually limits political power by recognizing spheres of authority higher than government. Rather, it means grounding human institutions in permanent principles that transcend changing circumstances and competing interests, enabling genuine justice that serves both temporal welfare and eternal destiny of human souls. Chapter 5: The Egalitarian Assault on Natural Diversity. Material progress often accompanies egalitarian ideology that seeks to eliminate natural differences among individuals and groups. This assault on diversity, disguised as pursuit of equality, actually impoverishes human experience by forcing artificial uniformity that contradicts both divine design and observed reality. The spiritual poverty of modern society partly results from this systematic flattening of human richness into mechanical conformity that destroys the organic beauty of natural hierarchy and complementary relationships. True equality means equal dignity before God and equal treatment under just law, not identical outcomes, capabilities, or roles in society. Human beings naturally differ in talents, interests, circumstances, and callings, much as instruments in an orchestra possess different ranges and timbres. These differences enrich society by enabling complementary contributions to common good, creating harmony through diversity rather than monotony through uniformity. When egalitarian ideology attempts to eliminate such differences through social engineering, it destroys the organic beauty that makes civilization both functional and beautiful. Consider how egalitarian materialism approaches education. Rather than recognizing that students possess different aptitudes and should be guided toward paths appropriate to their nature and circumstances, it insists that all must achieve identical results in standardized curricula. This destructive leveling forces gifted students to languish in lockstep conformity while struggling students are pushed beyond their natural capacities toward inevitable frustration and failure. The result benefits no one and wastes human potential that traditional education would have cultivated according to individual gifts and limitations. Traditional educational philosophy understood that human beings possess different forms of intelligence suited to different vocations within society. Some are called to contemplative life of scholarship and spiritual direction, others to active life of governance and military service, still others to productive life of craftsmanship and agriculture. Each calling possesses its own dignity and contributes essential services to common welfare. Educational institutions sought to identify and develop these diverse gifts rather than forcing everyone through identical programs. The same destructive pattern appears throughout economic life. Traditional societies recognized natural inequalities of talent, effort, and circumstance while maintaining moral obligations between different classes and occupations. The wealthy had duties to the poor, who in turn contributed what they could to common welfare through their labor and prayers. Such arrangements were not perfect, but they preserved human dignity across economic differences while acknowledging that equality of outcome is neither possible nor desirable in this fallen world. Modern egalitarianism, by contrast, views all inequality as injustice requiring governmental correction through redistributive policies and social engineering. This attitude destroys incentives for excellence while creating resentment between artificially leveled groups. It reduces human relationships to power struggles between oppressors and victims rather than recognizing complementary roles within organic community bound together by mutual obligation and shared purpose. The spiritual dimension of this assault becomes clear when we consider how egalitarian ideology treats tradition itself. Rather than seeing inherited customs and institutions as democracy of the dead that should be preserved and improved, it views them as systems of oppression requiring revolutionary transformation. This attitude cuts societies off from wisdom accumulated across generations while promising utopian futures that never materialize because they contradict permanent features of human nature. The conservative mind celebrates equality in inequality, the understanding that human differences enhance rather than threaten genuine community when properly ordered toward common good. True prosperity includes protecting space for diverse talents and callings to flourish according to their nature while contributing to social harmony. This requires neither rigid caste system nor anarchic individualism, but organic hierarchy that enables both personal fulfillment and social cooperation through recognition of natural diversity within framework of shared values and mutual obligation. Chapter 6: The Prudent Alternative to Ideological Radicalism. The spiritual poverty accompanying material progress often results from ideological thinking that sacrifices prudent judgment to abstract theories. When societies embrace radical schemes for remaking human nature and social institutions, they abandon the gradual wisdom of tradition for untested innovations that typically produce unintended consequences devastating to both material welfare and spiritual health. Political prudence offers the only sustainable alternative to this destructive pattern of revolutionary enthusiasm. Prudence recognizes that human nature contains both creative and destructive potentials that must be channeled through time-tested institutions rather than revolutionary experiments. Conservative reform preserves essential foundations while allowing organic adaptation to changing circumstances. This approach requires patience, humility, and respect for complexity, virtues that ideological thinking systematically destroys in favor of simple solutions to complex problems. Revolutionary ideologies promise to solve ancient human problems through dramatic social transformation. Whether communist, fascist, or progressive, they share faith that sufficient knowledge and power can create perfect societies by eliminating sources of conflict and suffering. This hubris ignores the reality of human limitation and the unintended consequences that accompany all human action, especially large-scale attempts to reshape social institutions according to abstract blueprints. History repeatedly demonstrates that utopian schemes produce dystopian results because they misunderstand human nature and social reality. The French Revolution's attempt to create society based on pure reason produced chaos and terror. Soviet communism's effort to eliminate class conflict created new forms of oppression more brutal than anything it replaced. National Socialism's promise of racial harmony led to unprecedented genocide. Each failure followed similar pattern: rejection of traditional wisdom, embrace of radical theory, initial enthusiasm, escalating violence, eventual collapse or transformation into tyranny. Consider how ideological materialism approaches poverty and economic inequality. Rather than recognizing that spiritual and moral factors contribute to economic conditions, it assumes that material redistribution alone will solve the problem of human want and social conflict. This approach ignores how wealth creation depends on virtues like thrift, industry, prudence, and honesty that cannot be redistributed through government programs or created through political action. Ideological approaches also overlook how meaning and purpose contribute more to human happiness than mere material sufficiency. Studies consistently show that people with strong religious faith, stable families, and meaningful work report higher levels of satisfaction than those with greater wealth but weaker social bonds and spiritual resources. Yet materialist ideologies focus exclusively on economic redistribution while ignoring or actively undermining the institutions that provide life with transcendent meaning. Prudent conservatism addresses poverty through multiple approaches that recognize human complexity and the interconnection of material and spiritual factors. It supports economic policies that encourage wealth creation while maintaining moral restraints on excessive accumulation. It strengthens families and communities that provide both material assistance and spiritual formation. It preserves institutions like churches and voluntary associations that address human needs holistically rather than treating people as mere economic units. The same principle applies to other social challenges. Prudent reform of education strengthens traditional liberal arts while adapting methods to contemporary circumstances. It preserves marriage and family while addressing legitimate concerns about gender roles within framework of natural complementarity. It maintains constitutional order while allowing democratic participation within proper limits established by law and custom. Such approaches may seem slow and incomplete compared to revolutionary alternatives, but they preserve essential foundations while allowing genuine improvement that enhances rather than destroys inherited wisdom. They recognize that sustainable progress requires moral and spiritual development alongside material advancement. Most importantly, they maintain humility about human knowledge and power while trusting in divine providence and accumulated wisdom tested through centuries of human experience. Chapter 7: Preserving the Permanent Things. The ultimate remedy for spiritual poverty amid material progress lies in recovering and defending the permanent things, those eternal truths and values that transcend historical circumstances and give meaning to human existence. These include divine order, natural law, traditional wisdom, moral imagination, and the institutions that transmit them across generations. Without deliberate cultivation of permanent things, material prosperity becomes curse rather than blessing, producing societies rich in goods but poor in spirit. The permanent things cannot be manufactured or purchased, they must be inherited, cherished, and transmitted through living tradition. This requires individuals and communities willing to sacrifice immediate gratification for long-term cultivation of character and culture. It demands recognition that human flourishing depends on more than material satisfaction and that some goods are worth preserving regardless of economic cost or popular opinion. Educational institutions bear special responsibility for transmitting permanent things to rising generations. Traditional liberal education exposed students to great books containing eternal wisdom about human nature, moral order, and divine purpose. Such education formed character alongside intellect, producing leaders capable of governing themselves and others according to transcendent principles rather than mere expedience or popular passion. Students learn to think historically, understanding their place within great chain of being that connects past, present, and future in meaningful continuity. Modern education largely abandons this mission in favor of technical training and ideological indoctrination. Students learn facts and skills but lack wisdom about life's deeper purposes. They master critical thinking that demolishes traditional beliefs but receive no firm foundation for ethical judgment or spiritual development. The result is spiritual poverty despite intellectual sophistication, graduates who can manipulate information but cannot discern truth, who can analyze problems but cannot envision solutions rooted in permanent principles. Recovery requires deliberate effort to restore educational institutions that transmit permanent things through integrated curriculum combining intellectual, moral, and spiritual formation. This means supporting schools that treat education as formation of whole human persons rather than mere job training. It means defending classic curriculum that exposes students to greatest achievements of human civilization rather than contemporary ideology that dismisses past wisdom as irrelevant oppression. The same principle applies to other cultural institutions. Families must reclaim their role as primary educators of children in moral wisdom and spiritual truth. Parents cannot delegate this responsibility to schools or other institutions but must actively transmit values through example, instruction, and participation in traditions that connect family life to transcendent reality. Churches must preach transcendent truth rather than therapeutic accommodation to contemporary culture. They must offer challenge rather than comfort, transformation rather than affirmation of popular prejudices. This requires courage to defend unpopular truths about human nature, moral obligation, and divine purpose even when such teaching conflicts with prevailing cultural assumptions. Local communities must resist forces of standardization and globalization that destroy particular traditions and loyalties. They must preserve distinctive customs, institutions, and relationships that provide identity and meaning beyond mass consumer culture. This requires active effort to maintain what Burke called little platoons, the small associations that mediate between individual and state while fostering civic virtue and social responsibility. Individual citizens can contribute to this restoration by living according to permanent principles regardless of cultural pressure to conform to materialist values. This means practicing virtue in daily life, supporting institutions that preserve traditional wisdom, and refusing to measure success solely through material accumulation. It means cultivating moral imagination through great literature, beautiful art, and sacred music that connects temporal existence to eternal truth. Most importantly, preserving permanent things requires understanding that they represent not arbitrary preferences but discovered truths about reality itself. They emerge from millennia of human experience testing different approaches to fundamental questions about justice, beauty, truth, and the good life. They survive because they correspond to permanent features of human nature and divine order that no amount of material progress can change. The conservative mind maintains hope because permanent things always survive temporary fashions. Truth, beauty, goodness, and the human institutions that embody them possess staying power that no material force can ultimately destroy. Civilizations rise and fall, technologies advance and become obsolete, political systems emerge and collapse, But the permanent things endure because they reflect eternal realities that transcend historical change. Our generation's sacred task is ensuring they survive current challenges to bless future generations with wisdom accumulated across centuries of human struggle toward truth and virtue. Conclusion. The spiritual poverty behind material progress is neither inevitable nor irreversible. It results from philosophical errors that can be corrected through recovery of traditional wisdom about human nature and divine order. Material prosperity becomes blessing rather than curse when grounded in transcendent purpose and guided by moral imagination that recognizes both temporal needs and eternal destiny of human souls. The permanent things offer tested remedies for contemporary ailments, providing foundation for genuine progress that elevates both material conditions and spiritual development. Our choice is clear: continue down the path of sophisticated barbarism that produces wealthy misery, or rediscover the eternal truths that make civilization truly civilized. The conservative mind points toward renewal through fidelity to those principles that have sustained human flourishing across centuries. When we honor tradition as democracy of the dead, acknowledge transcendent order as source of justice and meaning, defend natural diversity against egalitarian leveling, practice prudence rather than ideological radicalism, and deliberately cultivate permanent things, we discover that true prosperity encompasses the whole human person, connecting temporal achievement to eternal purpose. This is the wisdom our age desperately needs to recover if we hope to build societies worthy of human dignity.